Then we got to see a side of Micah when he was volunteering with the Reality Project that just really was so enlightening, so encouraging. Reality Project saw it too, and they hired him as their director. So we weren't the only ones that were wowed, but I'm really excited to have Micah share with you today.
Thanks. Awesome. I won't need that. I'll just talk really loud because
Okay.
I'm known for that. Cool. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I'm going to use the whiteboard, so I'm just going to pull this up quick. See what's back here. So, with that being said, those are my notes here. I put them on there. You're already stealing them, Linda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I might not even need these. I don't know. But anyways, so like Linda said, my name's Micah, and I am the director of an organization called the Reality Project. It's not super well known, but it has been around for about 20 years. But you maybe have heard of First Image, which is a majority of what First Image does is the crisis pregnancy centers of Portland. They have 4 of them. There's one here in Gresham. And the Reality Project is a ministry of First Image. So we're connected to PRCs. But basically, the purpose of the Reality Project is to help transform and promote sexual and relational integrity in the lives of young people. And we do this primarily in 2 ways. One way is the church side of things, where we put on half-day seminar workshops for parents of kids of any age, really, especially parents of young kids, to help teach how to have healthy sexual cultures in your home. In other words, how to have conversations with your kids about sex, how to have not just the talk, but talks, and have those open conversations. Because for the most part, especially those of you who here are parents, most parents are pretty terrified of having those conversations, but at the same time, it's important. So that's one side of the things. Again, they're half-day workshops that churches will host me or host us to come to, and we put on these workshops to help. How do you wrestle through all these different issues on sex and all the different relationships, marriage, and kind of seeing it from what's the story God's telling about these things and what's the purpose of these things, versus what the world's saying about these things. So, and how do you talk to your kids about that? So anyways, that's one side of it. The main part of Reality Project, of what I do, basically, is fulfilling this purpose, right? Is I'll go into high school health classes and teach the sex ed portion of health. Which is pretty awesome, pretty neat. It's not the type of sex ed that typically is out there, or typically is what is being taught, or what these kids would get anyways. But for example, it's about a little bit over a 3-hour lecture presentation that's broken up into 2 to 4 parts depending on the school. And so every week I'm in a different school. All day, pretty much, depending on how big the school is. Sometimes it can be 1 class a day for 4 days, or I'm teaching 6 classes a day for 3 or 4 days. And again, we're in about 20 different high schools, mostly public schools. And just explaining this to you, it's still, to me, saying it out loud, it's really a supernatural thing. We get to go in and give a perspective on sex and relationships that these kids they're just not getting. And it's rooted in the gospel. Of course, we can't say that. We can't speak the name of God or the Bible or anything like that. But it's really going in and instilling value in kids and helping recognize that they're valuable, that their bodies are valuable, that sex is a really big deal. Going in there and telling them that, like, hey, like, we need to talk about sex more, I think, as a culture. But it seems like the one place it's not talked about is in our own homes or with your parents. And kids will be like, well, yeah, that's exactly. But if you haven't noticed, sex is being talked about all over the place. If you can do like a little experiment right now, if you could just imagine, go back to when you were 14 or 15. Imagine that you are, this isn't a mentor training, that you actually have just come to health class at your high school. Some of you are like, I don't want to go back there, no. But if you can imagine at this time of your life, life's pretty confusing. You're trying to figure out who you are, identity. Like Shannon talked about, this phase of your life is when you're trying to figure out who you are. You're trying to figure out your role in different places. And life's kind of confusing. You're trying to figure out who you are and what your purpose is and what life's all about and trying to figure things out. And with that, you also have 2 other things that are on your mind a ton, and that is sex and relationships. In fact, sex and relationships are being talked about all the time with your friends, at school, wherever you're at. And not only that, but in most of the TV shows you watch, movies you watch, music you listen to, books you read, these things are being talked about. And the main message or theme that is being portrayed about sex is that it's not really a big deal. Just go sleep with whoever you want, whenever you want, and as long as no one gets hurt, just kind of go out and get yours. That sex is, typically the message is that the point of sex is just what you feel in the moment, and it's based on your personal preference and pleasure. Which we would all agree, that's pretty much the message we get, right? And when I ask students, well, what kind of, let's list off TV shows that would portray sex this way. This sex isn't a big deal. And of course, they start shooting out pretty much every single show you can think of, all the way from The Office or Friends, all the way to shows like Game of Thrones, right? And everything in between would portray sex this way. We talk about movies. And of course, there's tons of movies. And we talk about we took the top 20 hit list songs on the radio right now. How many of those songs would talk about sex as it's not a big deal? And they're like, 19, like most of them. I'm like, yeah, pretty much, except for maybe like an Adele song or Lecrae or something like that. And then, of course, we just see it everywhere. So if you can imagine, this is where you're at 14 or 15. This stuff's on your mind. It's being talked about a lot. But then you come to health class and you hear that there's this guy called the sex man who's going to talk to you about sex and relationships and stuff like that. So anyways, that's kind of like what we do. And again, when talking about these things, we talk about a whole bunch of stuff. And I don't know, how long do I have till, Linda? You have to give me a time limit. You really have to give me a time limit. Just so I know.
You have an hour.
An hour from now? Okay, so like 4:02. Okay, so we talk about anything from healthy and unhealthy relationships, and what does that even look like or mean? Because it's amazing how many kids are in actually unhealthy relationships or dangerous relationships, and they have just no even a clue, because that just is so normalized. That's just the way things are. So we talk about what does a healthy relationship, unhealthy relationships look like. We talk about sex, what is sex. We talk about oral sex and why that is actually sex. We talk about virginity. We talk about love. We talk about pornography, the implications of pornography. We talk about sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. We talk about, I think if I didn't say this already, we talk about love and what is love. And we just talk about all these different things that young people don't really have the opportunity to have really deep, meaningful conversations about. And so, of course, I don't have time to get through everything, but I do. I was asked to talk to you guys about teen sexuality and healthy relationships. So I just want to kind of go through really fast some of the many things that I do in a typical school, or talk about in a typical school. And we're not even going to get to half of it, but I just want to touch on the major points, especially not the points that other speakers have already talked on, because they've just done an incredible job with that, and I've just been super blessed even being here and hearing this stuff. So anyways, I want to share a passage with you, and if you have your Bible or your phone, you can look it up. It's Romans 1:19 through 20. And no, I don't share this in school. I wouldn't be invited back. But I just kind of lay the precedence for as we jump into this. Romans 1:19 through 20 says this. It's a familiar passage. We hear it a lot. It says, since that what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. And that includes things that have been made that God has created specifically to point to him and his glory, as things like sex and relationships, as actually a very good thing that he originally gave us as something that is good, and is supposed to, he's seeking to tell us things about himself through things like sex and relationships. If you go way back to the garden in Genesis, like Gary was talking about briefly, he looks at Adam and he says, it's not good for man to be alone. We all know that, well, Adam wasn't alone. He had God. But then he creates Eve for him to not be alone. Why did he do that? Well, ultimately, what was God doing? He was expressing an aspect of his nature through creating Eve for Adam, and Adam for Eve, by saying that God's relational. Because God has always been eternally in relationship with himself. He's the triune God. Is this making sense? Through Father, Son, Holy Spirit. God is relational, and he has always been relational. And so one of the most basic assumptions that I make in every school I go into, with every student that we're teaching, is their basic assumption is that at their core, they know that they deeply desire and need relationship. Whether they know that they were created by a God who cares about them or not, they all know that. One of the first questions I'll ask at a school is, how many of you guys want to or can see yourself being married someday? And almost every single hand goes up. People want that. They long for deep, meaningful, lifelong, relationships, and even just romantic relationships. They desire that. But the thing is, kids these days know a lot about sex, especially nowadays, because of what they're exposed to. It's just that most of what they know is broken. And although they, in a sense, they know all this stuff, right? And they're kind of just going along with it, with this message that sex isn't a big deal, even though deep down they know there's something off. And that comes out by the end of the week when kids will tell you, or you just have light bulbs go off and they go, yeah, I always knew there was something off about all this stuff, but I just didn't know what. And until I heard this. So thank you for coming, and on and on and on. I get surveys all the time. It's not because of me or what I'm doing. It's just the curriculum we're able to, and what we're able to talk about it's just amazing. It's very non-shame based. It's very humorous. It's very interactive. We really just want kids to think for themselves when in reality they're not. They're not able to have really deep, meaningful, honest conversations about these things. One of the first things I start out and to ask them is, how many of you had the talk before, right? And they raise their, with your parent or guardian. And that's pretty much as far as it goes with an adult or somebody mature in their life when it comes to talking about sex. It's viewed as a taboo subject to actually have meaningful, real conversations about, because the adults in their life aren't really talking to them about it. And when it is, it's more like, just don't do it. Or if you do it, just be safe about it. And that's what sex ed has actually turned into, is they're going to do it anyways, so it's turned into risk reduction. If you're going to do it anyways, so we're just going to, tell them how to have safe sex. And it's actually really amazing, because the schools, every school that Reality goes to teach sex ed, we're it. They don't have that other source of sex ed teaching other stuff. I mean, they still learn about STDs and how to prevent from unplanned pregnancies, but we actually don't talk about that one bit. Because our goal is not that. Our goal isn't a fear tactic. Our goal is to instill value in these kids and help them realize that they're valuable and what they do actually matters. That what they do sexually, because it's such a big deal, matters. Anyways, I'll get into why. But one of the first things, I'm just breezing past a whole bunch of stuff. One of the first things that I talk about is something called the script. And so, for instance, if you guys have heard of a script for any movie, TV show, play, drama, sitcom, there is a script, right, that every actor reads from. And it tells them how to portray their character, right? And so, believe it or not, any actor, right, a good actor is going to really learn their character well. So they're going to really learn their script and learn their character. They're going to learn who they are, where they're from, how they dress, how they talk, what they believe, how they behave. What are their greatest fears, insecurities, dreams, passions, desires in life? All those things, right? They're going to try to learn how to portray their character. But believe it or not, every single human being in the entire world reads from a script in life that tells us how to portray our character. Everyone in the room here now does that, especially if you imagine for young people, for adolescents. There's a script that we all read from every single day that tells us how to portray this character. And these scripts are typically influenced and written by a whole bunch of things, such as they can be written by your home life and your parents. Be written by an educational system, by religious systems. They can be influenced and written by culture, like entertainment, by the TV shows they watch, the movies they watch, music they listen to, books they read, by their closest friends, by their peers, by all these different things in life help shape and help influence the scripts that we read from every single day. And scripts aren't particularly bad, they just kind of exist. They can even be helpful, right? If I'm talking to a young lady and I know she's got this very visible baby bump and I think, oh, how cute, there's a little baby down there, like, that's so awesome, I'm wondering if she's pregnant. But do I ask if she's pregnant? Well, no, because if I'm wrong, my life could be on the line, right? So you don't ask. In that moment, in that particular situation, I'm actually reading from a script that says you just don't do that in that particular time. But scripts can be dangerous, living from a script in life, and that's when we're living from too many. For example, what you might have in your home script over here, again, still imagine you're 14, 15, okay? That might help with this example. When you're at home, you have what's called your home script. So who you are, what you do, what you believe, how you behave, how you talk, how you act, all those different things when you're at home. But as you get older, you hit around puberty, especially around that age, you try to use that script at school, you realize very quickly, this isn't really working here. It doesn't work the same way at school as it does at home, or people aren't really accepting me the same way here at school as they do at home for this script, so you write a new script. You write, and this is called your school script. So you leave your home script at home, but when you go to school, you have your school script. So who you are, what you do, what you believe, how you behave, how you talk, how you act, even how you dress changes a little bit, or a lot, when you're at school, even just in terms of different groups of friends. A lot of young people have different groups of friends. So for instance, you might have one group of friends over here. These are like your goody two-shoe friends, your study buddies, the friends your mom or dad think you're hanging out with all the time. So when you're with, or your youth group friends, whatever you want to call it. So when you're with them, you talk like them, act like them, do those things. But you might have another group of friends over here you also hang out with. These are more like your edgy, more wild friends. They're like the hot box in the car after school type friends, right? So like when you're with them, or they might go to certain parties or drink or smoke a little. So when you're with them, you kind of do those activities because when you're with them, you're reading from their script. Right? You might have another group of friends even over here, because some of these kids have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different groups of friends. So this group of friends might be the more like tough, like rebel against the parent and your government type of friends. So they might act all cool and tough and spit and use racial slurs or a certain language or whatever, right? So when you're with them, how do you talk and act?
From their script.
Yeah, from their script, exactly. Now why can this be dangerous? Well, for one, usually students will say, well, because you can mix them up and lose friends. I'm like, well, yeah, but why is that dangerous? And they go and they think about it, and then eventually one student will be like, well, because you're kind of being a fake. The guys will say, you're kind of being a fake, or the girls will say, you end up losing yourself in this, which is very true, isn't it? See, this group of friends over here probably has no idea what you're like when you're with this group of friends over here. And vice versa. This group of friends over here probably has no idea what you're like when you're with this group of friends. You're kind of being a fake. No one knows who you really are, and you don't even know who you really are. And being in high school, that phase of your life is already confusing enough. You're already trying to figure out who you are, right? And then you add this to it, that's not going to make anything better. That's going to make it worse. And all those kids will tell you, like, and they totally agree, like, if anything, they want to be them. They want to be themselves. They don't want to be a fake. It's not a respectable thing in our culture, but yet this is a lot of how kids live. They're reading from a script, they don't even recognize it or realize it. And that's what you're dealing with some of these girls that you're going to be mentoring, is they're going to be living from different scripts in life. And it's recognizing that behind that mask, in other words, that they put on depending on where they're at or what hat they're putting on, depending on what group of people they're with, it's important to recognize what's behind the mask. What's really going on? Because some people say, well, but Micah, that just gives me more control. I can change who I am. I can change my character and how I portray my character depending on who I'm with. It gives me control. And I say, well, here's the thing. If you have to change who you are depending on who you're with, who's more in control of your script? You or other people? Unanimously, everyone says, well, other people, right? So that's kind of laying the groundwork as we get into other things is we talk about the script, the reality of the script, right? Helping kids recognize there's the script in life that we're living from. And not that those can be bad. Scripts just exist. There's scripts that exist for everything we read from in life, including things like sex and relationships, right? Would you agree that we read from a script every day influenced by culture that tells us how to view sex and relationships? So we talk about relationships, the phases of a relationship. But one thing we'll talk about, for example, I'll ask the question, I'll say, what does any relationship need in order to be healthy? What would you say? What does every relationship need in order to be healthy? In other words, any relationship's going to be hard, right? It's not like a fairy tale thing where it's happily ever after. You just have to find your soulmate. And I tell kids, you actually will probably never find your soulmate. And then they're like, what are you talking about? Well, I just don't think anyone's specifically born your soulmate. See, I'm not my wife's soulmate, but I want to become her soulmate. Does that happen overnight? Well, no. One dude a couple weeks ago jokingly was like, yeah. And I was like, you're in for a rude awakening, man. Like, it doesn't happen. But I want to become her soulmate. Does that happen overnight? No, that takes time. It takes effort. It takes certain things in our relationship so that we grow in that area. So I can become her soulmate. And in other words, when crap hits the fan, you have to have certain things in your relationship in order for that relationship to be healthy and to last, right? Because relationships are hard. Marriage, is even harder, Which the kids go, what? Oh, yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, it's hard. So, what does any relationship need in order to be healthy? Throw something out. Trust. You know what's interesting? Whenever I ask that question, in any school, that's the first word that comes out. So it doesn't even surprise me. That doesn't work. Okay, so yeah, trust. So we talk about trust. That's really important. There's a lot of words we use in our culture, especially young people, that we think sounds really great. And it's like, well, yeah, obviously you have to have trust, right? But we don't talk about what does that look like? What does that mean? That doesn't work either. So this is what I call the trust triangle. I'll draw another one. So there we go. The trust triangle. So for instance, in any relationship, for you to have trust in a relationship, you need 3 important elements. Okay? For any relationship to have trust. So the H would stand for what? Honesty, exactly. Honesty. If you find out you're in a relationship with somebody, they're not being very honest with you, how much trust are you going to have for them? Yeah, not very much. Or none at all, right? What do you think the L stands for? Loyalty, good. Thank you, Chris. Loyalty, exactly. And I tell the youth, it does not matter who you end up dating or marrying someday. This could be the most attractive, awesome, most incredible person to you in the entire world. Thanks, Don. And I hope that they are, right? They should be. But it does not matter who you end up dating or marrying someday. You will, for the rest of your life, be attracted to other people. That's just not going to go away. Like my wife, that's Christy right there. She's gorgeous, right? And she's not only gorgeous, she's smart, funny, nice, everything, right? And I'm not the only dude on the planet. She could easily be with other guys if she wanted to be, but every single day she wakes up and chooses to be loyal to me. What if I went to my wife and said, hey, honey, I just want you to know that I've been hooking up with other women on the side, but, I find them attractive too, so I still love you. You can't blame me, right? Obviously, is that going to be healthy? Well, no. Is she going to be okay with that? No, nor should she be, right? You see, I could find somebody more that I find maybe prettier or nicer or smarter or whatever, and I could leave my wife to be with that woman, but I would eventually find something in that person that would dissatisfy me. I would. Because the reality is there's no one single person in the entire planet that can completely make you happy and fulfilled. It's impossible. So just because that's going to be the case, you're going to find other people attractive, that's just always going to be there, right? Doesn't mean you're just loyal to the person you're already committed to and with, right? And again, the kids get this, they just don't hear it, and they're totally 100% agree. But it's just like, it's almost so obvious, but they still don't hear it. So yeah, loyalty. You got to have loyalty. If you don't have loyalty in a relationship, you're not going to have much of this or anything at all. V is vulnerability. And this is a big one, right? Because you got to be vulnerable in your relationships. Relationships are very vulnerable things, right? But are you going to be super vulnerable with somebody on the first date? Well, no. And a lot of these kids know people who are too vulnerable at the beginning, and you end up getting hurt, right? But as trust builds, you're going to learn to be more vulnerable with this person. As time goes on and as you build trust. Same thing with honesty. You go on a first date with somebody, you're going to say everything that pops into your head. You freak them out, scare them away. You're not going to do that. But if that makes sense, that's the trust triangle. Okay, what very important for any relationship. What else does a relationship need in order to be healthy?
Communication.
You need to communicate, exactly. Communication is very important. You find out this person has been dating this person, they're not even talking. You're thinking, okay, what's going on? That's not healthy, or is it even a relationship? A lot of things is like kids, a lot of us, we don't want to talk, we want to avoid conflict, right? But there's going to be conflict and disagreements in any relationship. It's learning how to argue or communicate healthy ways through that conflict and not avoiding it, because that's called passive aggressive, and then eventually that explodes later, right? So yeah, communication. What else does a relationship need in order to be healthy? Respect, and that's usually the second or third one that what we hear. But not just respect, mutual respect, right? But when we say respect, what do we mean? Respect, and we talk about respect all the time. I'm going to respect this person.
Can you use the black, please? Black marker?
Oh yeah, that'll be easier to see. I'll use one of these new ones Donna gave me. Whew. Okay, hopefully this can go on there. Oh, it's not permanent. Okay. All right. So yeah, mutual respect. But if we're going to respect somebody, what are we going to respect about them? They're what? There's 3 primary things we need to respect about somebody if we're going to actually show respect to them? Any guesses what those three things would be?
Boundaries.
Boundaries, that is one of them. What boundaries though? Specifically there. Okay, but more specifically, again, we have to really dive into these words, especially with young people, because we use these words, they don't even know what that means or looks like. So physical and sexual boundaries specifically, right? There's physical and sexual boundaries. Absolutely. So boundaries is one. Another thing we're respecting about this person is their beliefs. Good. This is like you guys know. And the other one is values. So specifically values, beliefs, and boundaries. Okay, so I would say that mutual respect, I don't have my PowerPoint, so I'm just going to draw here. Mutual respect ultimately looks like this, is when both people in the relationship are viewed each other as equal to the other, no greater or less than themselves. That means who you are, your morals, beliefs, boundaries, are not viewed as less than or greater than the other person's. Put it this way, you're never felt like you never are made to feel like you need to compromise who you are, your values, beliefs, or boundaries in order to be accepted or valued by the other person. Right? So for example, you go to a party with this person, you get to the party and you realize there's a lot of things going on there that you didn't realize were going to be there. And so, for instance, there's people are drinking alcohol or smoking weed over here, playing some weird sex game over here, and you're there and you're just like, okay, this is not really... If I were to stay here, I would be compromising my values, beliefs, and boundaries. Or these sort of activities are not compatible with who I am, right? So you tell this person you don't want to be there, and they say something like, it's not a big deal, it's okay, like you're just overreacting, give it some time, and I promise it'll be all right. We'll get through this, and you'll have fun. Just give it a chance. Is that person respecting your values? No. Are they respecting your beliefs? No. Are they respecting your boundaries, physically or sexually? No. You see, primarily in any relationship, every decision in any relationship is going to come down to one of two options, being selfish or being respectful. Selfishness is always going to be the easier one, but doesn't mean it's right. And true respect is going to be is when you're going to be willing to put yourself in that person's shoes and see it from their perspective. See, disrespect is when one person's I won't write them down. One person's opinions, preferences, desires, things like that, become or are viewed as more important than your own values, beliefs, and boundaries. Does that make sense? So I hear students say like, well, I knew I wasn't ready to have sex. I didn't really want to, but I thought that, in order to be a good girlfriend, I was supposed to give my boyfriend a blowjob. Or guys say, well, I thought in order to, to be a man or to feel like a man, even though I knew it wasn't the best idea and I knew I wasn't ready, I was supposed to have sex with my girlfriend. Those are both examples, sad examples, right? That's sad for me to hear because that tells me that those people felt like they had to compromise who they were in order to be accepted and valued by the other person. Because this person's opinions, preferences, and so on were viewed as more important than that. That's where disrespect happens. That's where an unhealthy relationship is. This was a big one to talk about. I camp on this one quite a bit. So those are two things a relationship needs. We also talk about the reality of friendship, and I show a picture of my wife, and everyone goes, "Oh," and I get brownie points from the guys. It's pretty great. So yeah, friendship's really important. The romantic side of a relationship is one that kids will tend to focus on, right? In a romantic relationship, they forget the friendship part. I tell them that ultimately, your best friends are your best friends. Why? Well, because they accept you for who you are. They've seen you at your best and they've seen you at your worst, but they still accept you. So being a fake in your relationship in order just to impress them isn't really healthy. And I see students walking around high schools all the time in relationships, and it's like the Walking Dead are having more fun than them, and you're thinking, wow, there's something missing here. So how many of you want to have fun in your relationships? Every hand goes up. Yeah, relationships are hard. If you don't have any fun at all, there's a problem there. There's something off. So friendship is another one. Another one we talk about is, that's really important, is commitment. Oh man, I normally ask a student to do this. Could someone come up here and draw a picture of a plant in a pot for me? Anyone who's just... Go ahead, come on up. Okay, we have the whiteboard because I'm not using my PowerPoint. Okay, so a plant needs what in order to be healthy and to grow? Water, sunlight, soil, right? CO2, all these different elements. If you take one of those elements out, what's going to happen to the plant? It's going to die. It's not going to survive, right? Same thing with a relationship. A relationship needs all these different elements in it in order for it to be healthy and to grow and to be strong, right? Now, the plant's going to represent ultimately a what? Good, it's a flower. This would be a great illustration you could use with the girls because it's a pretty flower in there. Okay. Yeah, you're like a flower where you're, a relationship would be like a flower. And just like a relationship, it needs all these different elements to grow. The pot's going to represent maturity. And I go through this whole spiel with them and share with them that actually, I'm not going to tell you you're immature because that's just not true. You're a young adult. You're not full on adulting yet, but you're a young adult. And at your age, you're right where you're supposed to be. But anyways, the pot represents maturity. And there's going to be certain things about, in other words, this phase of maturity that you're in, high school. And there's going to be certain things about high school that will limit the amount of commitment. Again, that's what we're talking about, right, is commitment. That you're going to be able to make to this person, or how big of a commitment that you're going to be able to make to this person that you're dating. So what are some examples of things about being in high school that can limit how big of a commitment that you're going to be able to make to this person? And so there's 4 primary things that students bring up. That's time, because they're really busy. High school's really busy with all that's going on. Does it take time to have a good, growing, healthy, mature relationship? Yes. The other thing they bring up is money. You don't need money to be in love, but you do need money to have a good, growing, healthy relationship. Cost to even buy a marriage certificate. You need a place to live, all those things. They don't have much of that in high school. The other thing is age. Just the fact that they're maybe not able to drive or have a car yet, that would limit that. You call them up, see you babe in 6 hours, I'm going to get on my bike here and be over there. The other thing would be, I'm drawing a blank now. Parents. You live under my house, my rules. These kids do not live where they get to make all the rules for themselves. Now, in reality, a lot of the girls in the design studio live in homes where there isn't much structure, but for the most part, there are still things about being in high school and the fact that they're not fully independent adults that would limit the amount of commitment they can make. But here's the thing. This is okay. I mean, this is just where you're at. It's not a bad thing by any means. But the problem is that most of us aren't okay with this. High schoolers want the big, mature relationship right now, with all of the emotional intensity, commitment, and sex that comes along with those types of relationships. And that's like a redwood tree-sized relationship, which is huge, right? You've seen a redwood tree? Any of those kids, and I tell you, you can have a relationship like that. One that has grown to be big and strong, has deep, strong roots, weathered lots of storms. But if I try to take that redwood tree and put it in this pot, what's going to happen? Yeah, the pot's going to break and this tree's going to die because this pot was never meant to sustain a redwood tree. In fact, this plant here is only going to grow as much as what the pot's going to allow it to, right? No, this needs to eventually be transplanted out of the pot into having full resources to all these different things it's going to need for that tree, a redwood tree, to grow and be strong. But what we try to do, kids try to do in high school, is they try to fit that big, mature relationship right now in high school, and it does not go over very well. Many of them will tell you that. And not that they can't date in high school, but the point is that, you have to take a step back. And these girls, for instance, need to take a step back if they are dating and ask themselves, what do we want this relationship to look like right now that's going to be best for this person and myself and our future? The reality is only 2% of high school relationships make it to marriage and go the distance. Of course, that wasn't a statistic back in the day. It was a lot more common. They might meet the person they're going to be with for the rest of their life, but it's not super likely. It's making sense? So this is kind of stuff we talk about with a healthy relationship and how just naturally there's going to be things about high school that can limit the amount of commitment we can make to them. Hopefully this is helpful in terms of just painting a picture for important things to communicate to any young person, because these girls are thinking about relationships a lot. It's very important to them, not just relationships in general, but romantic relationships with guys. And that's not a bad thing. We just need to actually have conversations about this stuff, and not in a shaming way, but just a realistic way. So things that can poison a relationship, things that make an unhealthy relationship, would be any opposites, right? Dishonesty, disloyalty, any form of abuse. And I'll go into all the different things that, because for the most part, I believe all of you would know what an unhealthy relationship looks like. Another really common one is someone who's emotionally unstable or codependent, right? But another question I'll ask is, let's say, for example, there's somebody in a relationship that's unhealthy. And they know it's unhealthy and they're not really happy anymore, yet they stay in the relationship. What are some common reasons maybe you remember or have heard from people of why they won't break up with this person, even though they know they should? They might say what?
They don't want to be alone.
Okay, yeah, and that's a really common reason, especially if this person's been dating this other individual for a long time. Maybe it's been a year they've been dating in high school, and the idea of breaking up with them or the idea of being single can be a very hard thing to fathom. And that's going to take a lot of getting used to, and you just don't even want to go there because you're thinking, I'll be alone. Or maybe they feel like they'll never meet someone ever again. This is it, or this is just the best they got, even though it's not healthy, even though this isn't the best person to be with, on and on. And then what I would say to that is, let's say you break up with someone today, you come back to school, is your teacher going to look at you and be like, hey, you single? Yeah, okay, go stare at the wall, and no one talk to them, they're single, they're forever alone. Is that going to happen? Well, no, it's not going to happen. I ask students, do you know people who have been or in relationships and are depressed and unhappy? Do you know people who are single and content? Or single and have no romantic relationship in their life and are fine and content? Some of them are like, me, there's a lot of them are single, right? So to say I need to be in a relationship in order to be happy, we know is not true. And to say I need to be in a relationship in order to not be alone, we know that's not true. You do have people in your life, and it will be hard to get used to being single again or missing this person. And that's why it is important to get people around you to help you. There's 3 common examples. I'll just give one more. The other one that's really common is that seems to be what girls will use, is like their hope that this person will change, or that they can fix this person. And we should always have hope that someone's going to change, right? Especially this person you're dating. Don't discredit the fact that they probably care about this person more than anybody in the entire world, and that's okay. But we associate, well, if I really care about them, why would I break up with them? And then we won't get into that because that's a whole other topic, but obviously I think you guys know how to communicate why the best thing you can do for them is to let them go. But I use this example, and I think Rachel really liked this one. I'll bring this one up. But for example, in the relationships like this, does it take both people in the relationship working together towards change for change to happen? Yes. You see, as soon as it goes from we can work on this, or we can fix this, to I can fix you, there's a major problem, isn't there? And that'd be like if I had a tug-of-war match with somebody. If I had a tug-of-war match with Gary, and Gary tries to pull me down off this stool as I try to pull him up onto it, who's going to win? Gary's going to win every single time. Every time, right? He'd probably win in any tug-of-war match against me, but even if someone half my size, sometimes I'll point out this like itty-bitty teenage girl, like, who's going to win? And they're like, well, her. Yeah. And we generally want to help this person. We genuinely want to pull them up and influence them and help them and pull them up to where we are. But what ends up happening every single time? They pull us down and they drag us along. And the longer you're in that relationship, the more frustrating or dangerous it can even be. And so those are some examples that we give. Even somebody who is telling you that you got to give me more time or give me another chance or just, work with me. If you don't see them genuinely putting in as much effort as you are to getting the help that they need and changing, then that person's an unhealthy relationship. It's dangerous. And the longer they're in it, the worse it's going to be. So that's just some things I point out because that's really common. A lot of kids are in unhealthy relationships, really even dangerous relationships, and they have all these different reasons why they stay in it. And so we talk a lot about that. We talk about sex, why it's a big deal. I'm going to breeze through. I'm going to skip some things here. But let me just share with you. Let's define sex so we know what sex is, right? You're like, I'm an adult. I know what sex is. But you ask kids what sex is, and they can't tell you. They'll be like, it's making a baby, or it's love. And I'm just like, you think about those kind of examples. You're like, okay. A female goes into a fertility clinic and gets her uterus injected with fertilized egg. Does she just have sex? Well, no. Can you have sex and not make a baby? Well, yeah. So that doesn't make sense. But what's making love, or its expression of love? Well, I tell them, well, yeah, but my grandma makes me cookies as an expression of love to me. is no. So, there's all these different examples. So what is sex? And we go through this whole big game, and it's super fun, and the kids love it, and we won't play it today because that would be really awkward. But it's fun with high schoolers because they'll just yell out words they've never thought they could yell at the top of their lungs in school. And they come up with all these different, any word you believe belongs to the definition of sex. So they say things like, penis, vagina, blah, blah, blah. And so we go through, and I usually am knocking off and crossing out every single one because I say, do you need this to have sex? Well, no. We need a definition of sex that incorporates all forms of sex for all people. So if you were to do that, sex is defined this way. Sex is when people, right? People what? Because we're not talking about animal sex, we're talking about people sex. And I tell them this funny animal, things like the male jellyfish has a detachable penis and will swim through the water, find a female, and it sticks to her forehead. And yeah, it's crazy. Animal sex is very different. Because students are like, well, isn't it like the same thing? No, it's actually really different. And that's just one example. And they love that. Okay, people need to what? And then the other word we need is this. Because if we don't have this word, we have to have this word to differentiate the difference between sex and abuse. If you don't have consent, it's not sex, it's abuse, right? And I define consent for them. Because a lot of times they think they know what that means for the most part, but the part of the definition they don't understand is there can be no alcohol or drugs, or any influence of alcohol or drugs in sex or sexual contact. It's considered rape, which is abuse. And even in cases where both people are drunk, yeah. And kids don't know that. And that's for multiple reasons, but I don't need to get into with you. But yeah, we need consent. People consent to what? What are they going to do? They're going to touch. You don't need to be emotionally intimate to have sex with somebody. It's not like mind sex, But you do need to physically touch each other's what? And then, of course, kids respond and they go, bodies! I'm like, think about it. No, they need to consent to touch each other's genitals. You have to have sexual organs, have sexual contact. You don't consent to shake someone's hand. That's not, okay. For what? For pleasure or orgasm, right? And then I asked, well, for instance, though, usually this is the one word that they will have when we play the game, is orgasm. We talk about that. Well, is this always the purpose or goal of sex? And they actually say no. They're like, well, what about people who are making a baby? And I'm like, okay, first of all, is it not pleasurable just because you're making a baby? Well, no, it's still really, really fun. You still have one of these two or both. But what about people who don't believe in having sex for pleasure, but just for reproduction? Well, what does this male still need to have in order to have an ejaculation of semen? He needs to have an orgasm. Anyways, I'm breezing through a lot of stuff because we talk about an orgasm and how that works and all that kind of stuff. And there's some cool, interesting facts about that they think is hilarious. So anyways, this is our definition, right? That we have, and it fits all four forms of sex, which we won't go through all four forms of sex. I don't want anyone fainting in here as we're talking about these. But again, we're just being really, really real. Now, here's the thing. Now, we talked about scripts, right? So we come up with a sexual script for, for the school, and the kids put these in order. The whole class will put these in order of what would come first and what would come last in the order of things. In other words, what is considered the least intimate to the most intimate. And so this is the order that they would go in, right? And by the way, the hugging means just a greeting, like a hug. I have to point that out because I think that means holding each other. Not exactly. So this is the typical order, obviously, that they would put it in. The sexual script. Okay? For the most part, in general, in our generation or culture, right? And then I go down and I ask, well, raise your hand when you think I'm pointing at the word or activity that is sex to you. You think this is sex according to our definition. And of course, most hands go up here. And then maybe one or two will end up going up here. Which makes sense, right? Oral sex is sex. But then I ask the question, when do you lose your virginity? Raise your hand if you don't think you lose your virginity until intercourse. And even since April, it's interesting, when I started this position and started teaching this course, most of the hands would go up. But even recently, it's not as many students will raise their hand at that. But those that do, I say, well, okay, then what's oral sex? Is it like diet sex? Kind of sex? What's oral sex? And we go through 5 primary reasons that people give of why this is considered less intimate than this, or why you lose your virginity here but not here. And people will say, well, there's you're not popping the cherry, or you're not making a baby, or you're not. And we go through all of them. I don't have time to go through all of them. There's 5 primary reasons, and we go through and we debunk them. And I say, well, you know what's interesting, guys? You know, ours is the first generation, me, millennials, first generation to ever put the sexual script this way. This generation, these girls you're going to be working with, the first generation to ever put the script this way. Most of their parents, some of you, age, and all of their grandparents' generation, generations beyond, always put the sexual script this way. Always. Oral sex was considered way more intimate than intercourse and would come later in the relationship, if at all. And I give a couple examples of some grandmas who wrote us in at the Reality Project of why. Pretty graphic examples of why this is clearly more intimate, right? After I've already debunked every sort of example or excuse of why our generation considers this less intimate than this. Or why you lose your virginity here but not here, because this is, considered like just a form of foreplay, or, the new goodnight kiss is what it's called. And this is what I tell them. I say, you know what? Whether you consider, kind of led them on a wild goose chase. I've led you to believe that I think it's really important that we figure out where you lose your virginity. And whether you consider yourself a virgin or not, I don't really care. I don't. And it's not because I don't care about you. It's not because I don't care about you and your worth and things like that. But we kind of use the word virginity to beat each other up over it, don't we? If you are a virgin, you're called a prude, a goody two-shoe, undesirable. And if you aren't a virgin, you're called a whore, a slut, or an F-boy, on and on and on. You can't win. We also use the word virgin to kind of see how far can I go until what I'm doing really matters or technically counts. And that's why, because oral sex is, again, not even their fault. It's what they get this message from entertainment, from pornography, from all these different things, that this isn't really sex. Anything's fair game, because technical virginity is still important to kids. It's actually really important still. It's a big deal. So that means I can do whatever I want up until intercourse. And so I try to debunk this idea. The question shouldn't be, where do I lose my virginity? Because not only will I not answer that for you, I think it's a dumb question. Not only will I not answer it for you, I don't know, I don't care. I don't. The question we should be asking is, what kind of an impact is sex having on my life? Or having on this person's life? This is, of course, after already talking about why sex is a big deal. But then I get into talking about, for example, from now on, whenever I say the word sex, what am I referring to? Our definition. The 4 forms of sex. All 4 forms. So oral sex or intercourse. And anytime you have sexual activity with somebody, there are 3 neurochemicals that are active in your brain, or released in your brain. Your brain is actually doing a whole bunch of things during sexual activity, right? Again, I hope that makes sense. I hope I breezed past that, but that makes sense. Like, the whole virginity question, I kind of lead them on to make them think that, like, that's really important to figure out. But it doesn't matter what they've done in their past. It doesn't devalue their worth as a person, or their value. Not one bit. Are there going to be implications and maybe consequences to having sex with 200 people in your past, or being sexually active? Yes, and that's the point I'm trying to make. But it doesn't matter what they've done in their past. It doesn't matter what's been done to them in their past. Their value as a person is not diminished one bit. But yet we use this word virginity in all the wrong ways, and I don't really care. We're not asking the right question. We're not. And this is the first generation to really be asking that question, right? Well, virginity, where's. And so that's why we talk about oral sex and totally debunk that whole myth that it's not somehow less intimate. Anyways, that being said, there are 3 neurochemicals, and this is kind of what I'll end with. I got 15 more minutes. 3 neurochemicals that are, there's actually several, but 3 primary neurochemicals that are active and released in your brain during sexual activity, any kind of sexual activity. One of them is called, you guys probably heard of it, it starts with the D. Dopamine, exactly. Dopamine is a pleasure chemical. When it's released, it makes us feel really good, right? So it's released during orgasm, right? And it's also released during certain amounts of it's released when we do things like eat food. we release a certain amount of dopamine. We do release it when we exercise. You know, if you've ever heard of the runner's high, that's a real thing. And you also release tons of it doing things like drugs. That's why dopamine is the neurochemical involved with any kind of behavior that can be addictive. For instance, you get a dopamine rush when people get dopamine rushes when they go shopping, when they play video games, when they watch porn. Even when you get a text message on your phone or check Instagram, you realize you actually get a certain amount of a dopamine rush in your brain. And that's why I say, it was actually kind of funny. I was at Canby High last week, and I'm saying this, and I say, that's why it's really hard sometimes to put your phone down. And there was this girl in the back on her phone. She was listening, but she was on her phone. She goes, like that, just puts it down, turns it off, puts it in her pocket. Like, I have a problem. Like, you know, it was just kind of funny. I just happened to notice that. But yeah, because dopamine's involved, but we'll come back to that. The other neurochemical that's involved is called oxytocin. Oxytocin is an attachment hormone. When it's released, it makes us feel really connected and bonded to somebody, okay? Really intimate and close to them. So it's released during sexual activity. It's also released doing things like holding hands with somebody or cuddling with somebody. That's why you've heard it called the cuddle hormone. We release oxytocin. Again, it makes us feel very close, attached, and bonded to somebody. It's also released in females during labor. And also it's released in females during breastfeeding. In fact, during breastfeeding, what happens is the mother and the child both release oxytocin at the same time, creating neurological bond between the mother and the child. That's why it's very important when a baby's born, right, to immediately be holding it, that physical contact, but also breastfeeding, because it releases even more of this oxytocin. In fact, studies now show that if a female is hugged for up to 20 seconds, she will automatically release oxytocin. It's powerful, right? I tell guys, now guys, it doesn't mean you go up to your crush at school and be like, I'm going to hug you till you love me, you know? It doesn't mean that, but it's a very real thing. It makes us feel really bonded. That's why, for instance, I was just reading a book called Unprotected. Oh man, have you heard of that book? I forgot who. Dr. Laura Lessinger, she didn't write it, but she was a big promoter. It's really good. But in the book, she just used an example of, like, that's why, for example, maybe a girl, for instance, goes on a date with a guy she thinks is okay, he's pretty cool. By the second date, she's thinking, okay, he's all right. By the third date, they have sex. Now, all of a sudden, she can't live without him. Why is that? Because you can actually create an unintended neurological, emotional bond with somebody that might not even be an ideal person for you. Even though this person knows this isn't the greatest person, you have a bond with them. And sexual activity releases a ton of this stuff, and that's why it can be so powerful. The third one's called vasopressin. Vasopressin is another attachment hormone, very similar to oxytocin, but it has more protective overtones to it. So when vasopressin is released, it makes us want to feel very protective over somebody. So for example, it's also released in our brains during any interaction with the child that we have. So you might have a young child or younger niece or nephew, brother, sister, cousin, whatever, somebody you babysit. Even though these little people in your life can be super annoying, the most annoying person to you in the entire planet, like I'll tell the kids, we're like, yeah. But if this person was ever in danger or threatened, what has been or would be your initial reaction?
Protect.
To protect. Now we're going to want to protect to keep any little kid safe, whether we know them or not, but especially this little person in your life that you've interacted with. A dad will automatically release vasopressin when he plays catch with his son or braids his daughter's hair. Automatically. Makes us want to keep someone close and safe and protected, right? And that's, again, released in loads, especially during sexual activity. So these two neurochemicals, they act like relationship glue. The more you have sex with someone, the more of that glue is poured out in the relationship, or more duct tape is wrapped around those two people. It makes them feel really close and bonded. But at the same time, you know that these two neurochemicals can actually be weakened in our brains. They can actually be totally removed from our brains to the point where your brain's not even using them anymore. It happens like this. For instance, you have sex with somebody, and you're releasing all three of these, right? So dopamine. So it's fun, it's, feels good, that's awesome. You're also releasing oxytocin, so your brain's telling you, keep this person close. Be connected, be bonded, be intimate. Be connected to them. You're also releasing vasopressin, so your brain's saying, keep them close, keep them safe, keep them protected. The more you have sex with them, the more this bond can become. But what if that person breaks up with them? Or you break up with this person? That's why maybe you knew somebody in the past, they were in a relationship that they broke up from, but they were sexually active in, and that's why those breakups can be so much more painful. A lot of these kids have friends like that. They know, like, yeah, because those two people actually share a neurological bond, emotional, chemical bond with each other, whether they even realize it or not, because of the sexual activity. So let's say that individual then goes and gets another relationship, they have sex with that person. The brain's still releasing all these neurochemicals, but your brain's actually, first of all, your brain's hurting, right? It's really hard, because your brain's going, well, where are they? I thought we're supposed to keep them close and safe and protected, be bonded, connected with them, and now they're not here. There's something off. Your brain's confused. You go and you have sex with another person, your brain says, okay, now I'm going to try to bond with this person, create an attachment with this person. Even though it's going, I don't know who you are, I thought we're supposed to connect with them, it's a little weaker, but I'm still going to. And what can happen is over time, through casual sex, having sex with multiple people, they can become weaker and weaker and weaker to the point where it's even known to occur when they stop working altogether. And if this happens, if these become weakened in the brain due to sexual activity or stop working at all, what's the primary neurochemical involved during sexual activity for that individual? Dopamine. So sex becomes about what? It's more specifically, yeah, we're getting there. You're jumping ahead. It becomes about the orgasm, the pleasure, the good feeling, the dopamine rush, right? But it's interesting, when you treat sex like a substance, it'll act like one. That's why addiction, sexual addiction, pornography addiction is a very real thing. You know, same idea of I drink alcohol to get a buzz or to get drunk. I smoke weed to get high. I go on a roller coaster to get an adrenaline rush, and I have sex to have my orgasm. When you do drugs, what do you got to do the second or third time? You got to do a little bit more. Why? You're building a tolerance and resistance to this, right? And the kids know this part, because they get this part of it about drugs in health class. They just don't associate it with sexual activity. It's the same thing with sexual activity. You actually build a tolerance and resistance to how you get aroused sexually. And again, we talk a lot about how this has worked out in our world. But one thing we talk a lot about is pornography. I know you're going to be working mostly with girls, but yeah, even with girls, the highest percentage, the percentage of girls that use pornography is skyrocketing right now, if you didn't know. 1 out of 3 people that visit a porn site is a female. Okay, so it is definitely more of a male problem, always has been, but and I do believe that girls go to pornography for usually different reasons, but regardless, this is an issue. But what people don't know, and talking about the addiction side of things, right? You're treating something like a substance. Right now, 88% of all the pornography that's viewed online has violent content in it. 88%. The porn industry is not stupid. They're really smart. They make more money than the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, and the MLB combined. Now, I know I'm in a room full of women, so you're like, I don't even understand. It's just something I tell schools, because I can tell them the over $12 billion annually the porn industry makes in the U.S., that would phase them, right? But you tell them it's more than all 4 of the largest sports franchises combined, they're like, whoa! Do people typically start watching this kind of porn? Any kind of violent pornography, anything with verbal, mocking, hitting, slapping, bondage, all that kind of stuff? Well, no, there's usually progression of things. And I walk them through the progression of things and how this usually ends up happening, all the way starting with just you on social media and seeing the photo of someone sexy, and that arouses you. It leads to these kinds of things. Not only that, but if you didn't know, the child pornography in the U.S., which is obviously illegal, takes in $1.3 billion annually, which is more than the NFL does. So if you don't control your desires will control you and take you places you don't want to be. And we're finding an issue, and again, this doesn't apply to females. It can, but it shows more in males because of what I'm about to tell you. But doctors are finding a medical condition that they've never ever seen documented before, and that is adolescent teen males are experiencing erectile dysfunction because of this issue. You're accustomed yourself to this hypersexual. By the way, I'm not even talking about specifically hardcore pornography or just internet pornography. We live in a pornographic culture. The picture, the covers of magazines that you see in grocery stores not that long ago was deemed pornographic, and it's still considered pornographic, but was illegal for children to see. I don't even tell the kids that that's not wrong. I don't even tell them this is wrong. For instance, though, in the 50s, it was considered, or 40s, some of you older people can tell me, attest to this. It was considered pornographic to show a woman's midsection, and you had to regulate where you could show those kinds of things, right? And I'm not even telling that's bad. I'm just saying that this is kind of interesting. The original Peep Show, they have one actually really close to here. The original Peep Show in the early 1900s was watching a woman like lift up her dress, show off her legs. They're like, what? You know, and I'm not even saying that's bad. I also like that's not bad, but isn't it interesting? We treat it like a substance, and it's no longer about building a bond or relationship or connection or intimacy or trust with somebody, which science proves to us that this is what happens when you have sex with somebody. And the other thing I tell them too is, if you're here and you're struggling with porn, or you've had sex in your past, you're having casual sex, which by the way, statistically speaking, because I don't want to freak anyone out, statistically speaking, first of all, 46% of youth in the state of Oregon will have had sex, sexual intercourse, for instance, before they turn 18. But statistically speaking, those youth who are having sex are not having casual sex. They're having sex in a committed relationship. Just to clarify, okay? They're not going around having random sex with people, right? Relationship matters. And yes, sex is fun, so it makes sense that that's where they use it. But anyways, be very careful that this is never condemning to any kid. That if you find yourself anywhere in this place or even here, that guess what? You can get right back to where you were. It's going to take time and self-control, but you totally can. And we talk a lot about that and how we can do that and things like that. I just wanted to make that kind of really clear. We talk a ton about pornography, and I could spend literally an hour just talking about pornography, the effects on our brain, relationships, society. There's a website called an organization called fightthenewdrug.org. Great. It's not a Christian organization, but I can use that resource in schools because it's not. But it's a really good organization, committing to promote raising awareness about those things. So anyways, there's typically a message that our boys and girls are being told about sex, and that's not a big deal. And typically, in general, girls are told that they're kind of sex givers, guys are sex takers, that you probably heard girls give sex for love, and guys give love for sex. Now that's, in some ways, pretty stereotypical. I don't like using that term as much, but it's mostly that is the case, not because guys want sex more than girls or vice versa, or guys or girls want love more than guys. How those are displayed can be different. I don't think that there's this major gap. It's just the way that and the culture in which boys and girls are being raised and telling them what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman is causing these things. Does that make sense? Not to say guys and girls are very different, because we are very different. But also, I kind of don't like stereotypes either too much if they're not very accurate. Anyways, with that being said, I just want to end. I guess I have 2 minutes is all, but I'm going to end just, I think this hopefully is helpful. And again, I hope I didn't just talk too much and make no sense at all, but I'm just breezed past just like not even 1/3 of all that we talk about, but I wanted to really touch on the things that I think would be helpful for you to wrap your minds around these kinds of issues where kids are facing and going through what's going on in their brains and things like this they don't even recognize or realize. But I want to just throw out 3 analogies to avoid when you're talking about sex with these girls or relationships or sexual activity that have been used in the past that, first of all, have never been proven to be helpful at all and can actually be dangerous. You maybe have heard the duct tape analogy. That you're like a piece of duct tape. Look at this one. This is a pretty common one. Yeah, you're a piece of duct tape. And like every time you have sex with somebody, it's like sticking that piece of duct tape to a wall or sticking that piece of duct tape to that person. And then when you go and you have sex with somebody else, you rip off that piece of duct tape and stick it to them. Well, the duct tape isn't as sticky. And if you keep, you have sex with people, you're not going to be, when you get to your spouse, you're not going to have the ability to have a very connected bond with them or intimacy with them or things like that. You've lost that potency. And this illustration has been used because it is true to the extent that, yes, having casual sex and the reasons I showed, or viewing pornography or pornography addiction, can limit our ability to feel connected to someone during sex, or the relational aspects of sex, the bonding aspects of sex. But it's a very dangerous, I think, a very dangerous illustration to use because it says that because if you've had sex in the past, you're less valuable than somebody who's quote unquote a And that's just not true. That's not Jesus, that's not the gospel. And that if you have lost that stickiness in a sense, to just recognize that and know you can get right back to where you were. It's okay, you've messed up. We've all messed up. We all have every single person in this room has sexual brokenness in their past. In one way, shape, or form. So using that, just don't. It's not good. The other one is the flower one. You're like a flower, and every time you have sex with someone, you give all your petals away. What if you give all your petals away to all these people, you'll have nothing to give to your spouse? No, it's not like that at all. This is ultimately a message of hopelessness, which is not the message of Jesus or the gospel, right? The reality is that it also says that your ability to have real sexual intimacy with somebody that's just as powerful or whatever is not going to be there because we gave the petals away. We've lost the petal. We don't have any petals left. So don't use that. The other one is a present. I'll read this one because I haven't heard this one much, but it has been used a lot. It's like, you're a present, and your sexuality is a gift. And again, I get I kind of understand where these are coming from because there's a lot of truth to this, right? But it can teach kids the wrong thing about their value and about their sexuality and about the grace and love of Jesus. Or the power of God's transforming love. If you let too many people unwrap it, you as a present, your spouse won't have anything left to unwrap. And that, again, is for the same reasons as the reasons before. This assumes an attitude of unforgiveness, or that, which is opposite of what Christ does. He restores and He redeems us. I don't know if you're going to be working with girls. A lot of these girls are in middle school, and maybe they're, in sense of innocence, like they haven't done anything. But regardless, in just the ways you talk about sex, relationships, really will make an impact on their decisions currently and in the future about these kinds of things, how they approach them. And if anything, they need to know that if they do or have messed up, that you are somebody that is not going, like Gary, just looking for that girl in downtown Portland. His message to this pimp was, just make sure you tell her that we love her so much. And we don't care what she did or what's going on. Because there's so much, the reason people distance themselves from others or disassociate with the church or whatever is shame. And obviously, whenever we feel shame, what do we want to do? We isolate and hide. It's the same exact thing Adam and Eve did in the garden. It's the same thing humanity's doing today. So the point is this, is that sex is a very big deal. It's valuable. It has the ability to be very powerful and be very healthy and good in a relationship and build a strong bond between two people. But because it's such a big deal and very powerful, it also has the ability of being very devastating in people's lives. For all the reasons that we talk about, not just pornography, but again, we talk about sexual exploitation, sex trafficking. It's amazing a lot of these kids don't even know about sex trafficking. Some of them do. Some of the schools have people that come in and talk about that, so I only touch on it briefly. But I was like at Centennial last spring. These kids had no idea. One girl had never even heard of this as a thing and was shocked to know this is going on all around. I'm thinking, yeah, this is why we talk about it, because automatically, right, they're more vulnerable just by not recognizing it, because they don't understand how this happens. It happens through relationships, not by being kidnapped. It's very rare. That's why you're reaching out to these girls first, building a relationship that's going to lead them to healthy places, rather than somebody else who's going to come and build a relationship and pour compliments and value and love on them and then trap them. You're doing it for the opposite reason, because they're all searching for the same thing, and that's love, affection, and value, and acceptance. So thank you for all that you guys do. It's a big deal. And I don't need to tell you about how big, Gary already talked about all that. So I don't need to tell you how prevalent this stuff is in our society. But the best way we can do this is by prevention. And that's why I do what I do. This is just a lot of prevention. And again, like I said, I can talk about all this stuff. I don't have to bring up STDs or unplanned pregnancies or how to avoid that stuff, or show pictures of genitals that have warts on them or stuff like that, which people think this is what you're supposed to do, just fear tactics. I think that's a really sad and shaming way, fear tactics that actually do not work. Kids nowadays know how to prevent from STDs, and they know that most every STD out there is curable. And they know of a whole gamut of different ways to have sex and not get pregnant for the most part. Those tactics don't work. I don't think they're meant to work, because that's not getting to the core of the issue. We're really talking about sex as, yeah, it's a really awesome, incredible, valuable thing. And you should want to have sex, not only want to have sex, but have good sex. You know, when we talk about that too, how we have to have realistic expectations too when we do get married. Anyways, I'm just blabbing now, but thank you. I think I'm 5 minutes past, which is really good for me. So there's Sunday school here at church tomorrow, so I'm going to get this family stuff and erase this. Actually, I'm teaching Sunday school tomorrow, so I definitely want this to So yeah, thanks so much, and I'm going to turn it over to whoever else is.